Hey everyone, it's Laura again from Yosemite Conservancy, and this is video number 2 of our watercolor series. In this video, we're going to cover color mixing. So go ahead and gather those supplies and let's get started. So some of the materials that you'll need for today's virtual watercolor lesson are a watercolor palette, a few watercolor brushes, a paper towel, some watercolor paper, and a cup of water along with a spray bottle. So generally a set of watercolors comes with all of the primary colors, including yellow, red, and blue. And if you have a student palette, you may only have one of each of the primary colors. But if you have a more advanced palette, then you may have a warm and a cool version of each primary and maybe even some of the other colors in your palette. Other colors in your palette are probably at least one green, a brown, and maybe a black or a gray. I'm going to be referencing the colors in my palette, which are commonly used in commercial artist grade watercolor sets. So when we're referencing these colors, I'm going to try to describe the colors so you can best match it in your own palette, because you might have some different colors with you at home. I do recommend doing a set of color swatches for your palette, because you'll notice as you do it that some of the colors actually come out a little bit differently on paper than the way they look in the palette. So it's important to know what kind of colors you're working with. But for the purposes of this lesson, I am going to be focusing on using primary colors so that folks who only have like a basic set with one of each primary color can learn how to kind of mix some of these other colors that we'd be using in our palette. So we're going to dive into the color wheel exercise, and you'll notice that I have two different color wheels here. One's a warm color wheel and one's a cool color wheel. And so what that means is I mixed this color wheel using the warm primary colors, and then this wheel I mixed the cool primary colors together. And you'll notice that some of the colors are slightly different. And so I just wanted to show that so that if you do have both cool and warm primary colors, you might want to try doing this mixing wheel twice with each set of warm and cool colors. But for this exercise, we're going to just use the warm primary colors. So those would be cadmium yellow, cadmium red, and phthalo blue. So the first thing you want to do is draw a little circle, and it's going to be your color wheel. And it doesn't have to be perfect, just something for you to work on. And so I'm going to put down the primary colors first. So again, that's our cadmium yellow. And then next is our cadmium red. And last but not least, our phthalo blue. And so next we'll work on our secondary colors. And so what secondary means is that it's a color that's mixed by using two primary colors. So when you mix yellow and red, you get an orange color. So we'll go ahead and do that one first. And then next I'll mix my green color using cadmium yellow and phthalo blue. And the last of the secondary colors is purple. So I'll mix the cadmium red with a little bit of phthalo blue. Next are our tertiary colors. So what that means is that you mix a secondary color with a little bit more of a primary color. So you'll notice that if you mix a orange with a little bit more yellow, it's going to be more of a yellow-orange, and vice versa. If you mix that orange with a little bit of red, it's going to be more of a reddish-orange. So we'll go ahead and try that with our orange, since I mentioned that one first. And then if we mix a little bit more red into it, we're going to get a really reddish orange color. And then doing the same thing again with our green. If you add a little bit more yellow to it, I'm going to actually wipe off my brush a little bit better so I don't add a little bit of red. And then again, if we add a little bit more of our blue to this green mixture, it'll make it like a really bluish. I actually have to add just a tinge more yellow because I overdid that, but that's perfect. So you get more of a bluish green there. And then last but not least, if you add a little bit more red to your purple, and then if we add a little bit more blue, I try to add it incrementally because the blue is like really, really overpowering. Yep, just that little tinge of blue really does the trick. So there you have it. So I went ahead and labeled my color wheel to indicate that I used warm primary colors, and I also wrote down which specific color I used for each of the primaries. And something that I find helpful for beginners is labeling your primaries with a P, secondaries with an S, and tertiary colors with a T. So now we'll practice mixing a few earthy colors that we'll use in the final video. The trick to mixing earthy and neutral colors is by mixing complementary colors. This refers to colors that are directly opposite of each other on the color wheel. So for example, if you wanted to mix brown, you could use red and green. So let's go ahead and try that out. So I'm going to use cadmium yellow, and phthalo blue, so I'll go ahead and put a swatch of my green here. And I'll add a swatch of red. And now let's go ahead and add that red to the green and see what happens. I'm gonna add just a little bit more red. So another color that is important to know how to mix is gray, and it's actually super simple. We can add a little bit more of a blue to our brown, and it gives us a nice gray color. There we go. So that's kind of the basics of color mixing, and we'll jump into some watercolor techniques in our next video.